Sometimes, even the smallest disagreements can snowball into something much bigger. In the case of the current tensions between Canada and the United States, what started as a political spat is now becoming a serious discussion, affecting not just the two nations, but the global economy. At the heart of it lies an issue so critical to both countries that it could fundamentally reshape their relationship. When Donald Trump took office, he made it clear that he intended to implement protectionist policies aimed at revitalizing American industries. One area that would see immediate impact was the energy sector. Trump's administration sought to capitalize on the abundant resources from neighboring Canada. The U.S. has long relied on Canada for energy imports, including oil, natural gas, and electricity. But now, Canada has begun to push back, leading to an escalating situation where energy supplies and the future of energy trade could be at stake. In fact, some are asking, is Canada in danger of becoming the 51st state, as Trump kept on repeating this?
So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
I would love to see Canada be the 51st state.
We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state.
This question is not just a rhetorical one. It's rooted in real political and economic changes. With such deep economic ties between the two countries, particularly in energy, it's hard to ignore the question entirely. Let's dive into why this is such a serious issue and what the future might look like. The tension over energy resources. The Trump administration's aggressive stance on trade has put Canada in a tough spot. Under the previous trade agreement, Canada enjoyed preferential treatment when it came to energy exports to the U.S. This allowed the Canadian energy sector to thrive. But now, with Trump's tariff on steel, aluminum, and other goods, the trade relationship between the two countries is being tested in new ways. And one area where the US has been relying heavily on Canada is energy. So why does Trump want Canada as its 51st state? Canada has some of the world's largest natural resources, especially when it comes to oil and gas. The oil sands in Alberta are the key source of crude oil for the US. But that's not all. Canada's vast natural gas reserves, its ability to generate hydroelectric power, and its uranium production are all vital to America's energy needs. So why is this suddenly so contentious? The US imports a significant amount of its crude oil from Canada. In fact, Canada is the #1 foreign oil supplier to the US, and any disruption in that flow would have serious consequences. Without Canada's oil, the US would find itself scrambling to secure other sources of crude, likely driving up prices. In fact, if Canada were to cut off its oil supply, it could result in an energy crisis in the US. That's not just speculation. Experts have warned that the consequences would be felt across many states, particularly those in the Northeast and Midwest, where Canadian oil is the key source of supply. This is where things get tricky. Canada is not just another oil exporter. It's the US's largest supplier of foreign crude. When Trump implemented tariffs, particularly those targeting Canadian energy exports, Ottawa began to realize that it might have a bargaining chip. If the US wants Canada's oil and gas, it will need to play fair. And while it may sound extreme, Canada has been considering what would happen if it used its energy resources as a bargaining chip. Trump is only here for 4 years. What is the impact of this trade war after that? The Keystone XL pipeline controversy. The debate around the Keystone XL has been one of the most public aspects of this tension. The pipeline was supposed to transport Canadian oil to US refineries in the Gulf of Mexico. Or should I say Gulf of America now. The Trump administration had approved the pipeline, but when Biden took office, he immediately canceled it, citing environmental concerns. This decision was met with harsh backlash in Canada. especially in Alberta. The pipeline would have been a lifeline for the Canadian oil industry, enabling it to ship even more oil to the U.S. But with the project cancelled, the relationship between the two countries grew strained. Canada felt that its interests were being ignored, and the U.S. was increasingly seen as putting its own interests first, even at the cost of its neighbors' economic health. The natural gas and hydroelectric power connection. Canada is not just about oil. It is also a key supplier of natural gas to the U.S. In fact, Canadian natural gas accounts for about 20 to 30% of the U.S. total supply. Much of this is transported via pipelines that runs across borders, providing a steady flow of affordable energy to U.S. consumers. If Canada were to shut down these pipelines, the U.S. would face an immediate shortage and natural gas prices could soar. For many American states, particularly those in the Northeast, access to Canadian gas is essential for heating homes, generating electricity, and fueling industries. But it's not just gas that the U.S. relies on. Canada also supplies a significant amount of hydroelectric power. This clean, renewable energy comes from Canada's massive hydroelectric plants in provinces like Quebec and Manitoba, which sell power to the U.S. markets. In the Northeast and Pacific Northwest, again, the U.S. would be hard-pressed to replace this supply if Canada decided to cut it off. And with the growing focus on climate change and the desire for clean energy sources, hydropower has become more valuable than ever. For the U.S., losing this clean energy could have major consequences, not just for its power grid, but for its overall environmental goals. Canada's uranium and nuclear fuel exports. While oil, gas, and hydroelectric power are the most commonly discussed resources, Canada also plays a crucial role in supplying nuclear fuel. The country is one of the largest producers of uranium, and its mines, particularly in Saskatchewan, are responsible for a significant portion of the world's supply. Many U.S. nuclear power plants rely on Canadian uranium to keep their reactors running. So, in a worst-case scenario, if Canada decided to suspend its uranium exports, the U.S. would be facing a serious shortage of nuclear fuel. Though it may seem unlikely, this scenario is not out of the realm of possibility. Canada has the ability to use its resources as leverage. And with rising tensions, it is more than just a hypothetical situation. The question now is whether Canada would actually go so far as to cut off these supplies. Canada's response: national pride and energy sovereignty. For Canadians, the idea of becoming the 51st state is not just a political joke. It's a matter of national pride. Canada has always prided itself on its independence, both culturally and politically. From the French-speaking population in Quebec to the ties to the British Crown, Canada's identity is rooted in a deep sense of sovereignty. The idea that Canada would simply become part of the United States is laughable to many, but the current political climate has brought this issue back into the public conversation. As tensions over trade and energy resources rise, some Americans are suggesting that Canada might just as well become part of the U.S. On top of that list is Donald Trump, given how closely the two countries' economies are intertwined. But for most Canadians, this is an insult. The country has its own identity, its own culture, and its own policies. To be seen as just another part of the US is something that many Canadians would aggressively oppose. The rhetoric surrounding the 51st state idea is becoming more than just a political quip. It's a challenge to Canada's sovereignty. Before you go, if you found this video helpful and want to support the channel, you can drop a super thanks below. It means a lot and help me keep making videos just like this one. Thank you so much for being part of the community. At the same time, however, Canada is not immune to the pressure of economic dependence. The United States is by far Canada's largest trading partner. and more than half of Canada's exports go to the U.S. A trade war, or even the threat of one, could have devastating consequences for both countries. In fact, if Canada were to cut off its energy exports to the US, it could trigger a severe economic downturn in both countries. For the US, the loss of Canadian energy would create an immediate shortage, driving up prices and potentially leading to an energy crisis. For Canada, the loss of access to the US market would mean a significant blow to its economy, particularly in the oil and gas sectors. Unemployment could rise and the Canadian dollar could lose value. So, while the idea of a trade war between the two countries might seem unlikely, the stakes are high. Both nations rely on each other in critical ways, and any disruption in the flow of goods and resources could have serious consequences for both. The road ahead. What does the future hold? The growing tension between Canada and the US over energy resources is a reminder of how interconnected the two countries are. But it's also a sign that trade relationships can quickly turn into political battles. The question of whether Canada will become the 51st state is, of course, an exaggeration. But it's a question that has gained some attention because of the economic and political realities that the two countries now face. Whether or not Canada will use its energy resources as a bargaining tool remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that the stakes are high. A trade war between Canada and the US could have far-reaching consequences, both for the North American economy and for global markets. As the two countries continue to negotiate, one thing is certain: energy will remain at the heart of the discussion. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe and share this video with whoever is interested in this topic. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.